Construction aggregate supplied by Verplank Trucking adheres to all MDOT requirements to be used in state or federally funded highways. Our testing procedures adhere to ASTN and ASHTO established standards for laboratory testing and processing. In Michigan, a status of Michigan Certified Aggregate Technician, MCAT, is required of individuals who perform aggregate testing. Verplank Trucking has in-house technicians who maintain up-to-date certification for performing tests on our aggregate stockpiles.
Concrete and asphalt products are made up of aggregates, among other ingredients. The aggregate size, shape, and the way the particles fit together has an effect on the characteristics of the building material. The aggregate gradation describes the distribution of particle sizes in a specific product and helps determine quality assurance.
How is quality control measured and required testing performed on these stockpiles, which can be upward of 75 to 80 feet tall? Samples of the aggregate stockpile are created, called mini stockpiles. This aggregate gradation is tested in accordance with MDOT standards to maintain assurances that what has been purchased is correct and our stockpile meets specifications for the end user. Creating a stockpile loading face is required before loading a truck or creating a mini stockpile for testing.
So the procedure for getting a sample from the mini stockpiles is to take 3 bucket loads from the loading face of the stockpile and dump it into a single spot. It gets mixed up by the loader 3 or 4 times. The loader picks it up and dumps it back down and then strikes off the top of the pile. The pile needs to be at least 1.5 feet to 2 feet tall.
And then you need to go to the top of the pile, dig down 1 foot with a shovel, and then scrape the edge of the freshly dug hole. You need to get 6 completely different random samples from 6 different locations on the mini stockpile using a flat-nose shovel.
When we take samples from the mini stockpile, there is no taking only the most beneficial sample from what is available. Verplank Trucking does not allow this practice. We obtain a random selection every time a mini stockpile is created for testing.
To maintain assurances of our stockpiles, the random selected samples are taken to our in-house lab to perform MDOT compliance testing. At our in-house lab, our technicians perform a series of steps which are MDOT compliant. Following the MDOT protocols is critical in obtaining representative samples of our stockpiles. This will ensure accurate test results are recorded and the aggregate performs as intended.
The first step is splitting the sample. Using a splitter, we reduce the sample size by directing the flow of the aggregate into 2 containers through adjoining chutes. This reduces the size of the sample to a predetermined weight defined by MDOT that can be worked for testing. The samples are then used to evaluate the quality of the aggregate or other properties necessary for its intended use. This methodology ensures that the smaller test sample is representative of the entire stockpile. After splitting, the sample is weighed. This is done to make sure the sample is above the minimum sample weight. Then the sample is dried and allowed to cool. We record a dry weight prior to washing. We wash it and dry it again. It is weighed again after drying. The material must be dried for a constant weight. We do this with an oven or a stove at 220 degrees Fahrenheit. The sample is weighed again after it is cooled off. This determines the loss by wash, which is the percentage of clay and silt in an aggregate. Now we move on to the brass sieves. A sample is placed in its properly allocated sieve set for the gradation to be tested. The sieve shakeout is a process that sorts the sample through the sieves with progressively smaller openings to determine the particle size of the test sample. For demonstrating the sieve shakeout process for this video, We are shaking the sieve stack by hand, so you can see how this process works in a safe manner. A powered sieve shaker is used for the actual testing.
The aggregate material passing through each sieve or retained by each test sieve will determine the particle size distribution of the test sample. Using MDOT testing specifications, we also log the necessary data to corroborate the testing taking place. This will also determine the particle size distribution of the stockpile. The tested results will be able to determine if the aggregate will comply with MDOT design and production requirements. You never want to discover the aggregate we are supplying is ineffective, or worse, unsafe. This is why Verplank Trucking adheres to such rigorous quality control procedures.